Hello, good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome back to Ask Abhijit. Today we are in the 269th episode. I hope everybody is doing fantastic. Thank you so much for being on this live stream with me with your questions. We will take questions as many as possible. Super chat, non super chat, whatever you decide. We'll take as many as possible over the next couple of hours, roughly. And let us see who all is there on the live chat. I can see Benjamin Netanyahu. I can see Rashmi Rathore from Rajasthan, Gaurish KB J Dikshit, Kumar Kanishk, Dev Akash Kotak, anonymous scientist, Bongiorno, nationalist, Mr. Saxena, Komal Singh from Melbourne, Raja Akash Kumar, Dev Akash Kotak from London, Vaibhav Dangra from Tokyo, Japan, Rohit Janged, uh, Geopolitical Dubey from Indore, Rahul Dunake, Kumar Kanishk, Ashish Karan, Manoj Zawar. Who else do we have? I can see Gopinath Bisra, IPK1S McLevin from Hawaii, Sher, Anonymous, Rashik Uddin, Vikas PJ, Vamshi Kalem, myself, Vimla Chaudhary, Lonely Raccoon, Chetan Aradhya, Arindam Roy. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you. Rick Datta, Sandeep Raj Krishnagiri, Mr. Irony, Jay Dikshit once again. I can see Shri Ramchandraya Namaha. Ankita, good evening. Chetan Aradhya, Rick Datta, Pranav, Polar Bear, Shubham Dubey, Gopinath, and so many other people. Anonymous is there, Cher is there, Abhishek Nair, Happy Sharma, Vikash PJ, and everybody else. So thank you so much, all of you, for being on the live chat. And let us take some questions. Gaurish is from Dublin. Good evening to you, sir, and everybody else. So let's take some questions. What do we have? Ashish Karan has asked, recent Indo-Bhutan talks. Is it possible to get Bhutan on board? The Dalai Lama could be reborn at a neutral place like Bhutan. Plausible deniability? No, there's no plausible deniability. There's no question of plausible deniability. We have taken this forward. Of course, Bhutan will be on board. Bhutan is another Buddhist nation. They practice Tibetan Buddhism, no question about it. So they will be perfectly on board with what we do, and there's no it's not entirely impossible that the next Dalai Lama, I mean the current Dalai Lama, could be reincarnated maybe in Bhutan, but most likely it will happen somewhere among the Tibetan diaspora, the majority of which is in Bharatvarsh, in India. So there's no need for plausible deniability. We have taken this forward. India has taken this forward, and we are not going to hide behind plausible deniability or whatever. This is out in the open between us and China. So there we have it. Okay. Kumar Kanishk says, as India and the US are long-term adversaries, then why did they send an Indian astronaut in the International Space Station and let India develop space technology to launch Gaganyaan and build space station, etc.? Look, the technology we are developing is baby steps. They are on the verge of reaching Mars in a few years. We are talking about reaching Earth orbit, low Earth orbit, and sending an astronaut to the ISS is no big deal. It's not something that gives India a tremendous strategic advantage, right? But it's good optics. Indians celebrate when there's an Indian astronaut who goes to the International Space Station. And Indians will think, yes, the US is our best friend, most reliable friend. Look, they have done us such a great favor by sending an Indian astronaut to the International Space Station. It's nothing for them. And we've paid for it. We have paid for it. It's not like they're doing it for free. And they are letting India develop space technology, launch Gaganyaan, build space station. Well, we are doing it ourselves. We don't need their permission or approval to do that, right? They regard us as a long-term adversary. We don't regard anybody as an adversary. We simply want to do our own thing. Leave us alone. We want to be friends with everybody. We want to cooperate with everybody. And we will rise as far as we can rise. And our historic position was number one. And that's what worries people. So that's the deal. It's just optics, sending an Indian astronaut to the International Space Station. It's optics. And we have paid for it. So Benjamin Netanyahu says, why do you always say I will never go against Pakistan? I don't know what you're talking about, sir. I have never said this or that. Yeah. Arindam Roy, once again, good evening. Thank you. John says, you once said that Indians are, first of all, let me remind you all, since I've taken this, well, I'll take this, but please remember, I have put this in the title of the video. I have put it is the pinned comment. I am going to take questions about geopolitics today. May I please remind you all, as Shri Donald Trump ji would say, thank you for your attention to this matter. I will only take questions about geopolitics. Since I clicked on this and I took this, so I'll take this, but going forward, I'll only take questions about geopolitics. So, Indians are on a starvation diet. I said that yes. What was our diet like before the invasion began? Read the book called Manas Ullasa. I have done this at least 2-3 times on previous live chats. Since you have asked me, I will quickly show you what the book looks like, and you can see for yourself what our diet was like about 800-900 years ago. And yeah, this is great for other YouTubers who may be watching. They can make a video about this for sure. I have no issue with that. So take a look at this. This is the Manas Ullasa. Is this the Sanskrit version or the English version? Let's quickly see. It will take a second to load, and let's smallify it a little bit. And this is the book. Now I'll not go through it and look for the portions where it has references to diet. This is the Sanskrit version clearly. Okay. And there's an English version also. My point is, if you read this book, you will come to know what the Indian diet was like before the starvation period, which was imposed upon us by the British and European occupiers who starved our ancestors to death. I mean, hundreds of millions of us died. Right? Okay. Ankita ji has gifted 10 memberships. Thank you so much, ma'am. That's so kind of you. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. God bless you, ma'am. Okay. Godliness says, do you believe Israel has achieved all its goals, or at least the core objective of destroying Iranian proxies? Trump is pushing for a ceasefire in Gaza, but real daddy Netanyahu is still on the hunt. So when it comes to Iran, there's history between the two nations. There's been cooperation, there's been an adversarial relationship, and overall the relationship has been marked by this adversarial nature. So during the time of the Shah, who was a US puppet, the two nations, Iran and Israel, had excellent relations. Then you had the Islamic Revolution that happened, I think, in 1979, and the Islamic government of Iran under Ayatollah Khomeini, it denounced Israel. It said that Israel has no right to exist. It called Israel the small shaitan. The great shaitan was Shaitan-e-Buzurg, obviously, is the US from their perspective, right? And they said that Israel has no right to exist and it needs to be wiped off the map. That's the kind of attitude the Islamic government of Iran has had ever since. During the Iran-Iraq war, the two nations cooperated. Israel provided supplies, weapons, and arms and ammunition to Iran. Okay, well, that's also there, and you can see my previous videos to understand why it was the case. Then after the fall of Saddam, after the end of the Iran-Iraq war, and eventually Saddam Hussein was ousted by the Americans and so on, so the relationship went back to being an adversarial relationship. So that's the deal. Now Iran has nuclear ambitions. They have a nuclear program. They may have a certain amount of fissile material that could be very quickly enriched to weapons grade levels, 90% plus purity, right? From yellow cakish stuff to actual uranium metal. And with that in mind, you have to understand what Israel's objectives are when it comes to Iran. They want to permanently denuclearize Iran. That's number one. That's the most urgent thing that they want to achieve. That's the most urgent goal from Israel's perspective, the denuclearization of Iran. That's number one. Number two, ideally, regime change in Tehran, and the Shah returns, or the son of the Shah returns and becomes a new US and Israeli puppet. That way, Iran gets completely defanged, becomes once again a vassal of the Americans and by extension that of Israel, right? And then if that happens, then the proxies don't even matter anymore. The proxies become masterless. Proxies allies the Houthis, the Shia militias in Iraq, Hezbollah, Hamas, whatever you want to all those assets that Iran has. So the way I see it, Netanyahu had two objectives. One was denuclearization of Iran. Second, even bigger, regime change. And he has achieved neither of the objectives. The Americans under Mr. Trump, they did deploy B-2 bombers over Iran. They did uh, hit Iranian nuclear sites like Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan, etc., with bunker busting bombs. And Trump has claimed that they have obliterated Iran's nuclear program. But Pentagon assessments, multiple intelligence assessments from the US that have come out, they say that it's not really caused any major damage. At most, Iran's nuclear program has been delayed by 3 to 6 months. There's no radiation that's come out, which means that none of the uranium was hit. And Trump had been foreshadowing his strikes on Iran for at least 2 weeks before he actually did that. So Iran had ample time to take out their equipment and fissile material from those nuclear sites. And you have satellite imagery that corroborates this, that this actually happened. They had big, long convoys of trucks taking stuff out, right? So with that understood, what has Israel achieved? They have achieved neither of their big goals, denuclearization or regime change, neither of those things. They seem to have suppressed the air defenses in Iran, and they achieved air dominance, air superiority over Iranian airspace, which is a big achievement, but yet they have not achieved the core objectives. Iran still has probably a huge stockpile of drones and various kinds of missiles, ballistic as well as cruise missiles. Their nuclear program is more or less fine. A delay of 6 months is no big deal. Some of their top leadership has been eliminated, assassinated, IRGC commanders, nuclear scientists and all, but Iran has a big population. They'll find a way to replace that. So overall, Israel hasn't achieved anything, unfortunately, from their perspective. Okay, and Netanyahu faces personal troubles. There are like 2 corruption cases against him, and in order to sidestep those, he would have wanted to achieve a huge victory, the kind of victory no other Israeli leader has had in the past, and that's not happened, unfortunately. So Trump has ended up not helping Netanyahu. He has achieved what he says is peace. Let's see how long it lasts. I believe it will last for a while, this peace. And Gaza, well, that's a whole different story. Trump wants peace in Gaza as well, and Netanyahu doesn't want. He wants Gaza to go on. So yeah, that's the situation. All right, I hope that explains it. Rashikuddin says, do you think RAW is better than Mossad or CIA? Well, I am not a person who has any connections in RAW. I don't have any connections in Mossad. I don't have any connections in the CIA. With that said, how can I make an assessment looking from the outside? These are very secretive agencies, right? So for us civilians, there's no way to make a proper informed assessment or evaluation of the capabilities and assign scores to each of them and then see which score is the biggest. I don't know. The Mossad obviously has its reputation precedes it. Probably one of the best, if not the best, intelligence agency in the world. CIA also has a long track record of doing, fantastic things from their perspective, right? And RAW also, RAW is also RAW. So I can't say really, can't really say. But from the if you look at the whole track record, this is past since 1950. Essentially, and I would say Mossad and CIA would be neck to neck. RAW, we don't really know about their successes or failures or whatever too much because it's all kept under wraps. So I can't really make an assessment. Okay, Achintya Anand says, Bhaiya, you have implied that treaties are meant to be broken. Well, I haven't implied that treaties are meant to be broken. I have said that if a treaty exists that is detrimental to my interests, there is no reason for me to continue with the treaty. And I've given multiple examples of that, right? For example, the treaty the Chinese had with the UK about Hong Kong, one nation, two systems. They walked away from it unilaterally. They said it's been enough time, and we no longer recognize this treaty. They can walk away from it unilaterally because it doesn't serve their national interests. The Americans walked away from the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal. Trump walked away from that unilaterally, right? Once again, they can do it. So The point is, if a treaty is detrimental to our national interest, then we are under no obligation to continue to abide by the treaty. With that understood, so treaties aren't meant to be broken, but sometimes treaties are imposed upon you by force. Such treaties, when you are strong enough, you should walk away from them. Or let's say you have a leader who did not understand what your national interest was, and then your leader 70 years ago, whatever, signed a treaty. Well, today you understand that it was detrimental to your national interest. You can walk away from it. Okay, that's a deal. You don't have to break every treaty. Most treaties that enter into you enter into those treaties willingly. You enter into those treaties after considering all the pros and cons, and you negotiate it properly such that it is ideally mutually beneficial to both parties or multiple parties. That's how you typically do it. But sometimes you have treaties that are bad. One example is the Indus Waters Treaty. Terrible treaty. Absolutely horrendously one-sided treaty, probably the most unequal treaty in the history of humankind, and we have finally walked away from it. And I would like to thank Prime Minister Modi for taking this step. Overdue, long overdue, and very, very welcome step. Thank you so much. With that said, Achintya says, does that mean that we can also back off from India recognizing Tibet as part of China? Absolutely. And what's happened a couple of days ago, His Holiness Dalai Lama stating that his reincarnation will happen as per established procedure, as per tradition, without any external interference by China. Well, that essentially says that China doesn't control the central issue when it comes to Tibet, which is the reincarnation of His Holiness, the highest authority in present day Buddhism. So that itself signals to the entire world that China doesn't have complete control over Tibet, which means Tibet is a disputed territory. So we're gonna ramp it up slowly as and when required. But yes, we can certainly back off from recognizing Tibet as part of China, and we can do it step by step, slowly, sometimes implicitly, like what we have done here, like what His Holiness has helped us do. And yes, uh, and the government may take its time, it may act diplomatically, but for us, we are under no such diplomatic obligations. So let us put it out in the public domain that Tibet is a disputed territory, and China illegitimately occupies Tibet. The Chinese occupation of Tibet is illegal, illegitimate, brutal, and it needs to end. Right. Um, Is this a geopolitics question? ChatGPT kind of tries to placebo its user. It gives biased answers also in all forms of global simulations. It never projects the US as a loser. Well, this is kind of a geopolitical question because this is an extension of geopolitics. Technology and propaganda is an extension of geopolitics. So that's how it goes. If I create a large language model, an AI system that I offer to the world, if I create it, okay, and I control it entirely, my minions, my employees control all the aspects and parameters of this large language model that I'm offering to the world as a service, then obviously I will always portray India as the winner. I am biased, my dear friends. In case you're not aware, I am a super biased person. I'm always biased towards India. Okay, so if I create a large language model, then this large language model of mine will always give you answers that are biased in favor of India. No matter what you do, no matter how you try to question it, interrogate it, try to fool it, mislead it, it will always give you answers that will be favorable that will portray India in a favorable light. Okay, and that's how it goes. The Chinese, what is it called? DeepSeek R1, R2. What R2 isn't out, I suppose. R1, I think, is the one. It's available for download. So if you have a powerful enough laptop and you download it locally, then you can make it do whatever you want. I mean, it'll not be biased. It won't have those constraints. But the one that's online, I suppose, it will be biased in favor of China. So that's how it goes. We should not be surprised about it. We should not be surprised. So this is a war of narratives. It's a propaganda war. And if you use these services, you should be aware that there will be inherent biases. There won't be blatant biases. There'll be very subtle biases. And oftentimes, most people won't even be aware of the existence of these biases. And what most people do on Twitter, hey Grok, is this true? And whatever Grok says, it's the gospel truth, as if it was written in the Bible or something, right? gospel truth. And people these days, if they want to fact check something, they will open up their phone and they'll say, hey, chat gpt, what's the answer to this? And whatever chat gpt says, that's the truth, that's it. Chat gpt ne bol diya. Now there's no question about what the truth is. So that's how people's minds are. And that's why it's so easy to fool them, and that's why chat gpt and all these llms, they are very powerful tools in the propaganda toolkit of the major powers. All right, please be aware of this, my dear friends. GPO Africanus, Scipio. Okay. As a follow-up to the Dalai Lama question, how do you see this realistically play out vis-a-vis Tibet? Vis-a-vis Tibet, will it work as we intend? What is the intention of making? First of all, we have to ask ourselves, what's the intention of His Holiness making this statement now? The assertion that his reincarnation will proceed as per tradition. The objective of that is to once again tell the world that Tibet is a disputed territory. Tibet is China's hold on Tibet is illegitimate, and so on. That's what we intended by doing this. Now it will play out in a variety of different ways. And if you want to understand how it could play out, then watch my the latest episode of Geostrategy that came out day before yesterday, the Tibet section, the Dalai Lama section, in which I have gone into great detail, and I've put out like 5 different forecasts with multiple scenarios as to how this will play out. Will it work as we intend? It is working the way we intended. See, what's happened actually is that the Chinese are openly, blatantly out in the public supporting Pakistan. When Operation Sindoor was happening, they were giving real-time information and data to Pakistan to counter us. And that's very concerning, because the Chinese seem to have spy satellites in position above our above outside of Earth, outside of the atmosphere, and keeping an eye on us. That's something we're going to have to take very seriously, and we're going to have to counter that with satellites of our own. We're going to have to bolster and augment our satellite network. But the point is, the Chinese have made it very clear to us that they are our enemies, and they no longer have any intention of seeking friendship with us like they were claiming last year. So now that they have made it absolutely 100% clear to us, so that's why we have taken this step. Okay, it's in response to Chinese provocations, and it's going to work the way we intended. It's going to work the way the Chinese wanted it to work. The Chinese asked for it, so we have given it to them, and now we're going to be more assertive about this. So what's the worst case scenario? China says you are our enemies. Well, China is anyway behaving as our enemy. So we are essentially telling the world that we agree that China is not going to be our friend. We now regard China as an adversarial nation. Their claims of friendship were all false, and we're going to do everything in our power to ensure that China doesn't get the upper hand over us. So with these symbolic statements, these indicative statements, like what happened, which raises the Tibet issue and makes Tibet again a gray area, a disputed area. With that, we also have to take real action of bolstering our armed forces, of ramping up our missile production, our border infrastructure along the LAC, the India-Tibet border, augmenting all our weaponry, air defense systems, naval systems, all of that. We need to do all that. Cyber security. So all of this has to happen at the same time. Our satellite network, we need to put up more satellites in space that can keep an eye on occupied Tibet and other Chinese activities, Pakistani activities. We need to augment the NAVIC system, so much more. So as long as we do these things, it's going to have the effect that we want, which is to increase our security vis-a-vis China. So yeah, it's going to be a work in progress over the next decade, essentially. Wooden Armor says, do you believe EU, the quality of life in the European Union will go down, given that it's mostly a service-based economy and AI will disrupt it? A lot of things will disrupt the quality of life in the EU. The first thing that will disrupt the quality of life in the EU is the large-scale, untrammeled, unmitigated illegal immigration that's happening, that's flowing into the EU. That's going to destroy their quality of life. They will no longer have safe spaces where they can sit and have siestas in public and have those bistros and cafes and sip coffee all day. Whatever they do, that's not going to happen. Secondly, because each nation in NATO is now going to have to ramp up its uh, its defense budget from less than 2% of GDP to 5% of GDP. That's going to cut down on the public welfare schemes and um, all of that. The welfare state system that all the EU nations have. So that's going to bring the quality of life down. Um, and of course, AI is going to have its own impact on this. So overall, the next 10 years, the quality of life is going to come down significantly in the EU region, which is very unfortunate, but it is what it is. These are the cycles of history, and we are witnessing them in real time. 10 years from now, it's going to be a different kind of Europe, definitely. Napoleon Singh Shekhawat says, how Israel allowed Nazi to be Mossad agent Otto Skorzeny. I am not aware of this person. Let me quickly Google the person. I am not aware of who this person is. Otto Skorzeny. Who was Otto Skorzeny? Otto Skorzeny, Austrian-born German SS agent, SS Standartenführer in the Waffen SS. Oh yeah, this guy, Egypt, etc. Well, if you're useful, you're useful. You see, that's how it goes. If a person is useful, and as long as the person is willing to offer their services, you don't trust them, but you use them. Works. Why not? You have got to be pragmatic in life. You can't be idealistic, especially when it comes to national security, when it comes to counterintelligence and all of that. You can even use the enemy's agents. If the enemy's agent is willing to offer you services for a price, you use the services. You don't trust the person. You verify constantly what they are doing. You spy on them, but you use their services. And that's how it goes. Lesson to be learned. Anonymous scientist says Prime Minister Modi was warmly received with a bear hug by Mr. Milei in Argentina 10 minutes ago. Well, okay, breaking news. How important is Argentina to India? Argentina is an important nation in Latin America, pretty large nation, the second largest nation in Latin America. Let's take a look at it, right? Let's go to the map. We haven't opened the map today thus far. Yeah, it's been, yeah, okay. So let's go westwards. We cross the Atlantic. We go southwards, and here we have Argentina. Pretty nice, cold place, actually. It's a pretty big country, the second largest nation in South America. Lots of resources, lots of mineral and natural resources. Pretty big country. They have a territorial dispute with the UK, the Malvinas Islands that the UK calls the Falkland Islands, and the UK occupies this. Argentina claims this, and so on. It's a pretty important country. It's a large country with so I say that it's a pretty important country, and it's one of the nations that's part of the global south. India should, in my opinion, be the leader of the global south. China doesn't want to play the role. China wants to play imperial superpower games. Let them try and play those games. Okay, let them try. Let them try and do all that. India should build consensus among the global south. India should reach out to every member of the global south. Prime Minister Modi was on a trip to multiple nations, is on a trip to multiple nations. He was in Ghana recently, in the Caribbean region, Trinidad, if I'm not mistaken. Now he's in Argentina. He's on this trip to reach out to as many important nations as possible. And Argentina itself, as the second largest nation in Latin America, it's pretty important, quite important. And we should have great relations with Argentina and Brazil and everybody else. So I think it's a great step. Abhishek Srivastav says, what's Russia's justification for the Crimea invasion? Well, Crimea was always part of Russia. That's the justification. That's the justification. It's always been part of Russia. Read history. So that's it. That's your answer, sir. Geo Warrior says, how should our foreign service be restructured to serve our geopolitical interests better? Not saying it's bad now, but just wanted your opinion. See, the first thing we can see is that we have approximately 16 to 1700 diplomats total. 1,600 to 1,700. Is that enough to take on the world, to engage with the world? Singapore has more diplomats than India. The US has more than 10,000 diplomats, maybe around 20,000 perhaps. Russia has more than 10,000 diplomats. You want to be able to engage with every single nation in the world, you need to have multiple people engaging with each nation. We need to have specialists that specialize in the history and culture and politics of each nation. Even a small nation like Sao Tome e Principe, or Botswana, or whatever else, Lesotho, Tonga. We need to have specialists in each nation, people who speak the local language, people who can speak the Togolese language, the language that they speak in Ghana, for example, the language they speak in Argentina, which is the Spanish of Argentina, whatever. We need to have people who understand the local politics, the local history. You need to have specialists. We need to have specialists in each nation, military specialists, uh, agricultural specialists, geoengineering specialists who are also diplomats. You need to have this sort of specialization within the IFS, and you need to have a much more expanded IFS. A nation of India's scale and magnitude needs at least 10,000 diplomats. Of course, we have these different ministries in India, and the various officers within each ministry, they also serve as diplomats during negotiations and whatever, but you need specialists within the IFS. So my opinion is very clear. We need to have a much more expanded IFS. They should allow lateral entry. They should have consultants, people who are not really within the IFS but will consult for the IFS as and when required, can be deployed if required, and so on. It needs to become a much larger, much more capable, much broader organization with lots of specialists as well as lots of generalists. That's what you need. That's what needs to happen. And well, high time for that to happen. Okay. Literally, Officer K says, global sentiment towards Israel, especially among Gen Z millennials, is at an all-time low, especially in key nations like the US. When do you think, if ever, will this reflect in policy towards Israel? When it comes to, okay, see, let's talk about the US, because you have mentioned the US. First of all, when it comes to India, I'm not sure if the sentiment in India towards Israel is at an all-time low. I don't think so. There'll be some sections of Indian society, whatever percentage you would have put there, who will never support Israel, who will always be virulently opposed to Israel. But overall, most Indians have a pretty positive view of Israel. So let's not discuss India. Let's discuss the US. In the US, I haven't seen polling figures or data or statistics, but it does look like there's a downward trend in the way Israel is regarded. That's what it looks like. Okay, in the absence of data, I cannot say for sure, but it's possible. The question then is, when will this reflect in policy, US policy towards Israel? Not anytime soon. So you see, this is the deal. This is the deal, my friends. In a democracy, public sentiment should drive national policy. That's what a democracy is supposed to be. National policy should reflect the will of the people, correct? Yes, no? Yes? Yes, friends? Yes, my dear viewers? Public policy in a democracy should reflect the will of the people. Now, in the US, let's assume that 51% of people don't have a very good opinion of Israel. Maybe 60%. Let's say, whatever number. Let's put out a hypothetical number. Let's say 60% of Americans don't see Israel very positively. So then, in that case, should US policy not be kind of reflective of that sentiment towards Israel? But that's never going to happen. Okay? So then the question arises, is the US really a democracy? That's how it goes. You see, public sentiment doesn't really matter in the US. The politicians will do what politicians do. So when it comes to the US, it looks like this will never reflect in American policy towards Israel. US policy will always put Israel first. Mr. Trump has said Israel is our number one ally. We have to do whatever it takes to support Israel. Not those words, but I'm paraphrasing. Okay, you get, please understand what I mean. Don't quote me on that. The stand of Mr. Trump is that Israel is our prime ally, and we have to do whatever it takes to support Israel. We don't have to necessarily support the prime minister, the current prime minister of Israel. We don't support individual politicians, but we support the nation, and we'll stand by the nation. And we'll do whatever it takes to ensure that the nations, Israel as a nation, its interests are always taken care of. That's always been the US policy for the longest time. Since since the Johnson era, I would say, after JFK, Johnson was the president of the US after JFK's assassination. And so the US policy has been extremely pro-Israel, almost like Israel first, ever since the Johnson era. So even if there is a significant sentiment against Israel in the US, among the Gen Z, among the millennials, US official policy will always favor Israel. That's how I see it. What's the reasons for that? Well, that's a whole different story. Okay. Abhishek Khare says, as you mentioned, the US or any other powerful nation tends to make other nations its vassal. How did India manage to avoid become one in Congress rule? Okay, which Congress rule are you referring to? There have been so many Congress rules. 20th century Congress rule, India was, well, you could say a Soviet vassal, kind of. During the first Cold War, the 20th century Cold War, which ended, let's say, around 1990, 91, thereabouts, that during that period, India was more or less part of the Soviet entourage. It was, you could say India was kind of a Soviet vassal, right? And Soviet vassalhood was very different from American vassalhood. So we were okay. It was fine for us. It did compromise us to a certain small extent, but not the way you get compromised under American vassalhood. Then, after the dissolution of the USSR, there was a unipolar moment for a few years. The Americans were the only superpower in the world, the only great power, major power, superpower in the world. There was no challenger on the horizon. And India was an insignificant nation for the longest time. Until the mid 2010s, late 2010s, India was insignificant. Yeah, India was a big growing market and economy and all that, but geopolitically, from a hard power perspective, India was insignificant. We had nuclear weapons, but we did not ever, use that to our advantage, and so on. So the US did not really care about making India their vassal during that period of time. India did get deeply infiltrated by the Americans, 1991 onwards. Okay, I assure you of that. Even today, India is deeply, deeply penetrated and infiltrated by the US at various levels. Even today, it is the case. Let me just say that. But we never became a vassal. During the tenure of Dr. Manmohan Singh, 10 years, we did sign this 123 deal agreement, nuclear agreement with the US, but it never really fructified into anything substantial, any action on the ground. And Mr. Dr. Manmohan Singh always had this, the approach that India doesn't have any big ambitions. We don't aspire to be a great power. We'll just exist, kind of, that sort of thing. And that is the way things went. So India kind of stayed below everybody's horizon. Nobody cared. It's only when Mr. Modi came to power and things started changing pretty rapidly that the world took note of India, slowly started taking note of India. And it's now that India is people are worried about India, in India growing and becoming possibly the next China if we get our things right. So that is how things went. Purushottam Pradhan says, relationship between sports and geopolitics, big fan. Thank you so much. Sports and geopolitics. Look, there's no actual relationship between sports and geopolitics. Sports is something that can build a national narrative. If you are great in sports, people regard you with more respect. Okay, people admire you more. I mean, Jamaica is a tiny little nation, but we admire Jamaica because of their sprinting team, because of Usain Bolt, right? There's a significant amount of admiration. And if you are a reasonably okay nation from a hard power perspective, okay, middle ranking nation from hard power perspective, but you produce great athletes and you win lots of golds, then it's great for propaganda. Then people tend to see you as more powerful than you actually are. And sports, of course, has this unifying factor. Nothing unifies a nation like success, right? You may have all kinds of disputes within the nation, but the moment there is a Olympic gold or a World Cup win, everybody forgets their differences and comes together. And a nation that continuously keeps winning, it has more unity within, and that's great geopolitical. So, right? So Shubham Dubey says, did the US support Israel because of the role of Jewish scientists in developing the atom bomb, and has continued technology and intelligence cooperation made Israel one of America's most trusted allies over time? The question is, why does the US support Israel? Look, in geopolitics, nobody remembers favors. Okay? No one remembers favors. Oh, you did something great for me 50 years ago, so that's why I'll be favorably inclined towards you. That doesn't work in geopolitics. No one cares. The only thing that matters in geopolitics is your utility to me today. You may have done great things for me 50 years ago, but in geopolitics, that such sentimentality doesn't work. There is no place for sentiment in geopolitics. The only parameters that are considered in geopolitical calculations is utility. America looks at Pakistan. Useful. We can use Pakistan to bleed India for 30 years, using Pakistani terrorism as our proxy. That's how it is useful. In the past, Pakistan backstabbed us multiple times, but we don't care. Pakistan is still useful. That's how it works. So Jewish scientists, of course, there were some Jewish scientists who developed the atom, who had a role in developing the atom bomb, but those were American scientists, right? I mean, you have many Indian scientists in America. So by the same logic, shouldn't the US support India very much? But it's not the case, right? Think about it. There are many Chinese origin scientists in the US who have developed various things, right? I mean, one of the scientists who developed stealth technology for the Americans was Indian origin guy. They jailed him for espionage. Do you know that? So it doesn't work like that. This is not the reason why the US keeps supporting Israel and all that. There are other reasons for that. All right, that's all I'll tell you. So please think logically. Please look at counter examples. When you want to understand something and you see some data that supports what you believe, please always ask yourself, do we have counter examples that don't support what I believe or what I want to believe? That's how you think critically. You look at counter examples. You look at things from a 360-degree perspective. You look at historical precedents. That's how you examine things. That's how you think critically. Just because there are like some examples that support what I believe deep inside doesn't mean that you should just jump to the conclusion. Always look at other examples. Then you will see that it doesn't really work that way. Okay? Aditya Garg says, any views on Sirinor development of electric jet engine? Could we produce civil aircraft in the future and supporting AMCA, which is with its engine? What is Sirinor? I am not aware of this. Looks like it's more breaking news. Let's Google it and find out. What is Sirinor? Sirinor. What electric jet engine? What is this? Sirinor. Sirinor tests electric jet engine for India. Let's see what this is. Open up, bro. Sirinor tests electric jet engine in India. It has successfully tested what it claims is the world's first all-electric jet engine in Pune, etc. Let's see what the technology is. Norwegian aerospace company with Indian subsidiary reported that its engine prototype exceeded the design intent of 40,000 RPM and 10 kgf thrust as measured by a load cell and so on and so forth. Ground test. But what's the technology? It's developing a tip-driven propulsion system using distributed edge mounted motors rather than a hub-mounted engine, built for thrust from 1 kilonewton to 90 plus kilonewtons. The design aims to support ranges exceeding 4,000 kilometers. UAV engine commercialization, etc. Sirinor engine architecture removes the need for combustion chambers and high-cost alloys. Power source agnostic engine can work with both battery and hydrogen electric energy sources. I'm still not clear about what the mechanism is. Let's see this IDRW all electric jet engine. Sirinor, etc., etc., etc. Traditional jets relies on fossil fuels, but Sirinor's all-electric design leverages advanced battery technology, electric propulsion to eliminate emissions entirely. So our view, okay, I'll have to look into this in detail. I'll not go do the research right now. Looks intriguing. So they don't. What's this? What drives? What is the motivating factor for the RPM? What's the power source? Is the question. Is it batteries? That would be shocking, and I'll be very pleased with that. Is it hydrogen fuel? Even that would be fine. I'm not sure. All electric means it looks like it's driven. Its power source is just a battery pack. That would be great. I've not heard of such technology before. So I'll look into this. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. Very interesting piece of news, and I shall look into this in more detail. If this works out, and if it has a output of 90 kilonewtons, for example, depending on the size of the engine, well, I think one or two engines on a jet aircraft will be tremendous. Of course, can you super cruise with that? Does it? Can you cross the speed of sound? All of these questions are there, but looks very promising to me. Looks promising for sure. Really now says, do you know if it's true Chinese harvest the organs of Falun Gong people, even though they're natives? They even sell human meat using leftover bodies. Horrific. I don't know. There's all kinds of rumors that come out of China. There's this persistent rumor that China, the Chinese have this very harsh death penalty system. They execute like well over 10,000 people every year. And I've always been hearing about this for the longest time, like 20 years plus, that the Chinese, when they execute somebody, they harvest the organs. And I've heard that there is a lot of oppression, that the Chinese have oppressed the Falun Gong people for whatever reason. I'm not sure what the reason is. Maybe it's a religious cult or whatever, according to China. But yeah, I've heard about this. I don't know if it's true. I've heard the rumors, the very persistent rumors, but I do not know if this is true. Unless you have sources on the ground, you can't tell. So I don't know. Adit Kumar says, what are your thoughts on the Ghatak UCAV? Can it act as an unmanned bomber for the IAF? Should we rent Russian bombers alternatively? The Ghatak UCAV, it was called the DRDO Aura earlier. Now it's called the Ghatak. It reminds me of the Russian Okhotnik. The Okhotnik, is it a bomber or is it a fighter interceptor? Let's first take a look at the Okhotnik. Is it I think, let's see. The Okhotnik is a Russian stealth heavy unmanned combat aerial vehicle. This is also a UCAV, unmanned combat aerial vehicle. And yeah, so I think it would be under serial production now. Yeah, so that's the deal with the Okhotnik. Now the Ghatak. The Ghatak UCAV. This is still under production, under development, obviously. Not sure. Oh, as always, please don't rely on Wikipedia too much, because it is likely to have distortions and misrepresentations and so on. But yeah, so the question is, can it? Okay, so this is an unmanned combat aerial vehicle, which means that it will be used for combat. It will be stealthy, hard to detect, and that gives it advantages. So you can bring it into close proximity with whoever you want to combat with, and take those guys down. So let's say you have a Pakistani fighter jet or a Chinese fighter jet that you want to engage. And you send the Ghatak, which is stealthy, so they can't detect it on radar until it's too late. And you come as close as possible, and then you fire maybe Astra missiles or whatever. And at a reasonably close distance, there's no way you can evade the Astra missile. So it's an unmanned combat aerial vehicle. It's for combat. But you can use the Ghatak design and make it much more massive. With obviously you need testing and all that for that. But then you can then use that as an unmanned bomber, possibly. Or maybe even convert that into a manned bomber like the B-2 or something. So yeah, the possibilities are endless once you get this right. Should we rent Russian bombers? We can buy Russian bombers. Why not? Still, the strategic bombers, I think, makes sense to have a few of those. That's for the government to decide. But I think it does make sense to have a few, uh, those white swan bombers or something, a few of those in um, our arsenal for sure. Nile says, why did Yugoslavia disintegrate into 6 countries? What was the reason behind the US hatred for them? Well, you have kind of answered your question. The US was behind the disintegration of Yugoslavia. See, Yugoslavia was part of the Soviet bloc, Eastern Europe, right? Um, the Balkan nations were all part of Yugoslavia. Let's go to the map. Let's quickly take a look at the region. So, which nations were part of Yugoslavia? Today, you have a bunch of nations in the Balkan region, right? Bosnia Herzegovina, Serbia, Kosovo, Montenegro, Slovenia, Croatia. All of these used to be part, even I think North Macedonia, if I'm not mistaken. All of these used to be part of this large nation called Yugoslavia. And after the dissolution of the USSR, Yugoslavia was broken up. And this was done by the Americans. So there was a civil war kind of thing. Old ethnic hatreds came out. During the communist period, no such thing was allowed. But when and see, Yugoslavia always existed under the protection of the USSR. The USSR was a superpower. It could protect its allies, and they remained protected. But once the USSR disintegrated, the Americans said that, you know what, we're going to destroy everything the USSR created. So they went ahead and you could say sparked the conflict or encouraged the conflict or whatever, but that ended up disintegrating Yugoslavia. What was the reason for the US hatred for them? Well, because they used to be part of the Soviet bloc, and the Americans wanted to destroy everything the Soviets had created because they could. It was a unipolar moment. They could. And that's why they did that. Terrible time, 1990s. Terrible times. Terrible civil war. Horrific. Absolutely horrific. Okay. Shashank says, any signs of boost in bilaterals between India and Australia? Well, I haven't seen any recent developments. We have this trade deal negotiations going on. We've already signed a trade deal, an initial trade deal, and there's going to be another more advanced trade deal that's going to happen sometime, maybe by the end of this year. And I think India-Australia relations are great. Lots of multi-domain, multi-dimensional cooperation in a variety of ways. Trade, a lot of trade. We obviously are part of the Quad and so on. But recent events, I haven't seen much. But yeah, overall, the relationship is on a very good track, is all I can say. Okay. Mohit, but well, thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Wooden Armor PK says, how relevant are fighter jets in modern warfare, and what can India do to develop a single crystal blade jet engine program like the French? Fighter jets are still very relevant, as far as we know. See, today we have lots of other systems that have entered the battle space. For example, drones, as we know, drones of various kinds, anti-personnel drones, anti-vehicle drones that can take out tanks very easily if you know where to hit the tank. Right, and also kamikaze drones or suicide drones. Those are also very dangerous, very relevant in today's battle space scenarios. We saw a lot of that during the 3-day Operation Sindoor, 3-day war between India and Pakistan, in which we hammered Pakistani terrorist sites and military infrastructure with loitering drones, Harop drones, and also missiles of various kinds. So where do fighter jets come into the picture is the question. Well, ideally, you want to suppress the enemy air defenses, SEAD, suppression of enemy air defenses. You want to achieve that first, which means you first take out their radars, then you take out their anti-aircraft batteries, which are anti-aircraft missile systems and guns and all that. Once you take all of that out, that's when you can send your aircraft. And then you may have, even before that, you want to destroy their air bases, which means you should take out the runways, at least make the runways inoperative for a few hours, crater the runways by hitting the runways with very powerful missiles. A BrahMos hit on a Pakistani runway will gouge a gigantic crater. Then no Pakistani aircraft can take off from there for a few hours minimum, maybe for a few weeks, depends. And then once the airspace is sanitized and the air defenses are suppressed properly, that's when fighter planes become relevant. Ideally, that's how we want to use them. Sometimes you have to do dog fighting, which is a 20th century thing in my opinion, but sometimes we still do that. In which case, you need good fighter planes. Agile, maneuverable, ideally four plus generation with long uh, with very powerful air-to-air missiles like the Meteor or the augmented Astra, even the regular Astra, and so on. Even various Russian air-to-air missiles are very effective. All of that. So fighter jets are still relevant as of now. What can India do to develop a single crystal blade jet engine program? Keep on iteratively improving what you're doing. Alternatively, buy, beg, borrow, steal. Whatever it takes, get it done. Buy it from the French or the Russians. Buy, beg, borrow, steal, whatever it takes. National interest is paramount. Get it done. So we have the Kaveri system that is ongoing, but I think that that program has been stopped for now, which means something may be afoot. I don't know what could be afoot, but we'll see about that. Um, the rational reporter says, why has India not been able to control the West like Israel, despite having a highly successful and significantly larger diaspora? Is it religion? Well, yeah, we are polytheists. Polytheists are hated by the West. The West is a monotheistic culture. The monotheism has been imposed upon them by force, by the way, but they no longer remember all of that. They are monotheists at heart. And the original monotheistic religion obviously was Judaism, right? Uh, it's the original Abrahamic religion. And the other two religions they appeared later. So Judaism, whatever it is the original Abrahamic religion. And the US is a Christian country. Whatever you say, whatever it claims, it's a Christian nation. Okay, the US. And Christians are first class citizens. Polytheists are not exactly first class citizens in the US. Okay. And the other thing is that we have a very large diaspora, sure, very successful, very rich, etc. But we are not unified. We are not united. Indians are like cats. You can't herd cats together. Have you ever seen a shepherd herding cats? Cats are incapable of being herded. They are too individualistic. They will go in their own direction. You'll never see 7 cats together. I once saw 7 cats together as a child, but that's a whole different story. So, so that's how Indians are. Indians can't unite. Indians love arguing with each other. Indians, we have too many differences despite being part of the same civilization. Or you speak a different language, or you eat onions, or you eat garlic, or you eat chicken, or you eat mutton. This is all within the dharmic umbrella, by the way. We have too many differences, too many small differences, and we consider those differences to be bigger than whatever unites us. And that's why Indians, despite being so successful, so rich, etc., in the US, they simply aren't united. They exist in these little communities, different communities. The Telugu speaking people will be here, the Punjabi speaking people will be here, the Tamil speaking people will be here, the Marwari speaking people here, Gujarati people here, Bengali people here, all different, they all different, exist in different multiverses, different universes. They will get together once in a while for whatever, but very, very seldom. And that's why Indians simply don't unite. And Indians don't seem to be politically active too much. There are a few examples. Vivek is an example, obviously. He, as you can see, he's not doing too well. Of course, he may still possibly, perhaps, a long shot, may become the governor of Ohio. We'll see about that. Other Indians, if they want to be politically relevant, they have to convert. Nimrata Kaur became Nikki Haley, converted to Christianity. Piyush Jindal became Bobby Jindal, converted to Christianity. Right? So that's the deal. So that's the deal. That's the story. Now, Caution World says, why is there no independence movement in Japan or Germany? People must know the truth about US occupation due to internet, even if it's not taught. Well, I'll tell you what. In Japan, from the time you are 3 years old or whatever, you go to school, you are taught that Japan is a pacifistic country. We believe in pacifism. We believe in non-violence. Violence is evil. Weapons are evil. In the past, we were very bad people. Our ancestors were very evil people, and they deserved everything they got. And Japan must never, ever, ever, ever take up arms. Japan must forever remain arms free. Armies are bad, and the good Americans, they are here to ensure that Japan never becomes bad again. Japan was very naughty in the past. This is ingrained into you from the time you were 3 years old, and you grow up repeating these mantras. And by the time you're 18, 20, you believe it with the fullest extent of your heart. What happens then? You're done. You simply, what independence movement will happen? Yeah, you may have a few Yukio Mishimas who come up and try to exhort the armed forces to take up arms, but they're going to laugh you off, and then you end up doing seppuku like Yukio Mishima. Germany also, same story. 2000 years, 2000th anniversary of Arminius routing the Romans. Nobody celebrated in Germany. You're not taught about these things, right? Germany also, same story as Japan. That's why education is the core of everything. That's why education is so important in India as well. May I remind you? I haven't mentioned it yet in this episode. Well, here you have it. Okay. Faisal Sheikh says, reports say that food supplies sent to Gaza after the so-called ceasefire are being drugged. Videos have surfaced allegedly showing people in Israel paying to watch the bombing of Gaza yacht. My thoughts. Well, I haven't seen. I'm not keeping an eye on what's happening in Gaza, first of all. But yeah, what's happening in Gaza is obviously a humanitarian catastrophe. No question about it. No question about it. Which is why ideally I would want the UN to take over. The UN, right? The UN is supposedly a neutral organization. It's the organization that's in charge of world peace. The UN should take over in Gaza. They should be in charge of everything. If they are, I don't think they are. If they are, then they should have a proper presence there. A UN peacekeeping force should be there in Gaza, and then everything should happen through the UN, and the UN should check everything. If food supplies are tainted, contaminated, drugged, whatever, then those should be checked, verified, because before they're given to the people of Gaza, and so on. Look, what are my thoughts about this? The people of Israel clearly don't have any love towards the people of Gaza. This enmity goes too deep now, and I suppose Israel will be okay with this. I suppose many people in Israel may be okay with this. Okay, it is what it is. I'm not sure about the people in Israel paying to watch the bombing of a Gaza yacht. Not sure, but well, yeah, this is a absolute terrible tragedy, and yeah, what can I say? The UN should step in and stop whatever's happening, and they should ensure that there is no terrorism that emanates from Gaza towards Israel, and they should ensure that there is no more fighting that Israel does, bombing of Gaza. As long as there is peace, things can go forward, and maybe people can move on with their lives. There's no question about the fact that Hamas has been terrorizing Israel. They have all these tunnels in Gaza, built under hospitals, built under whatnot, built under schools, and they've been launching all kinds of missiles at Israel. And then the October 7, it was, whatever date it was, 2023, the terrorist attack against Israel, which sparked all of this off, right? So I think Gaza needs to be, what needs to happen is that it needs to be demilitarized, and then the UN should ensure that there is no more fighting. And if there have been any war crimes from whatever side, the people responsible for that need to be brought to account, I would say. Yeah, it's a terrible situation overall. But look, from my perspective, it's hard for me to have a tremendous amount of sympathy for Gaza, given the fact that Hamas supports Pakistan. Hamas supports Pakistan's activities in POK, and overall their approach towards India has been very negative. You have to put your nation first. But overall, I would say the UN should take over. There should be no more violence. Whatever is happening should end. If anybody has committed war crimes or atrocities, they should be taken into account and brought to justice. No question about it. Yep. Uh, MK says, if Israel ceases to exist, does it nuke the world like the US? Because you said Israel someday controls US and US nukes world, it ceases to exist in nuclear war. What? Look, Israel, US, two separate nations. Okay, let's look at it that way. There may be tenuous control here and there. We'll not discuss that. Israel has something called the Samson option, which says, what is the Samson option? Israel is surrounded by historical enemies, yes. And consider a hypothetical scenario in which the enemies are on the verge of destroying Israel. Israel's military has failed, and the enemies are on the verge of invading and smashing Israel to bits. Hypothetical scenario. In that scenario, Israel will employ the Samson option, which is a nuclear option, in which it will destroy all its enemies. So if we are destroyed, we'll ensure everybody else falls with us. And they have apparently a list of targets. No Indian targets, but interesting targets nonetheless. Okay, in the Samson option, some world capitals are there, allegedly, major capitals. Not Indian, not in any Indian city. The US also has its version of the Samson option, which is nuke the whole world. If the US is in under imminent danger of going under, they will launch nuclear missiles at everybody, including nations that have done nothing to them, including India. That's the deal. So that is the American augmented Samson option, which is the whole world will be destroyed if the US goes down. That is their plan. That's so evil. Seriously, it's incredibly evil, but that's their plan. That's all I'll say about this. Okay. Interesting question comes up over here. Yes, very interesting. Vishal Natha says, recently an ex-CIA operative, John Kirikau, revealed that the Pakistani nuclear command is indeed under American control. That is, it is controlled by an American general. And my assumption has turned out to be true. Well, it was, yeah. So yes, I've seen the video. I have seen the video of this person, this gentleman, CIA agent John Kirikau, saying this. The Pakistani nuclear command is under American control. It's an American general who controls the Pakistani nuclear so-called deterrent. It's American nuclear weapons that the Pakistanis have, and they are controlled by Americans. That's the deal. So here we have it. Once again, the Americans have plausible deniability. They'll say, no, this guy is irrelevant, or he's unreliable. And this is an unofficial statement. He has retired so and so years ago, and he no longer knows what's happening, and he's making claims that are completely false. They can make any kind of statement. They can claim plausible deniability, but the fact is that it's amply clear now. The so-called Pakistani nuclear deterrent is actually American nuclear weapons on Pakistani soil aimed at India. Maybe at other countries also, but mainly at India, which tells you the relationship that the Americans have with us and the way they see their relationship with India. Apurva Chatterjee says, is India prepared to take a definitive leadership role in the global south, or does it still see itself as a bridge between the West and the East? So you can do both, right? You can do both. A nation like India, we are on good terms, friendly terms with everybody, except for a couple of countries. We are not on good terms with China because of the Chinese attitude towards us. We aren't on good terms with Pakistan because Pakistan is a US vassal and a terrorist nation, and it exists to bleed us. Apart from these two countries, we have Turkey, that is pro-Pakistan and very strongly anti-India. Apart from a few countries like these, a handful of countries, we have good relations with everybody. So even if we take up an increasingly larger leadership role in the global south as we are doing now, it doesn't prevent us from being a bridge between the West and the East. For example, we are on great terms with all the Asian nations except two, China and Pakistan, 2.5, Turkey also. Beyond that, all other nations in Asia are we have great relations with them. We have great relations with Russia. We have great relations with, well, the West, US, kind of. It depends on the US, but from our perspective, we would like to be great friends with the US also. So if there is a need for mediation between the US and Russia, and the two are not on talking terms, we could step in and perhaps mediate in some way, or so, or something like that. So we are certainly taking on a larger leadership role in the global south. You saw that during the 2023 G20 summit, during which we took the initiative of bringing in the African Union into the G20, which it wasn't there before. We brought it in. And right now, our prime minister is on this trip to a large number of global south nations. So we are doing that. We are actively doing that, taking on a larger and larger leadership role. At the same time, we can be a bridge between the East and the West. So both scenarios are true at the same time. It's not either or, it's this and that. Why not? Wooden Armor PK says, why don't Romani people get the sympathy they deserve? And can we Indians, civilians or government, do something to help them? See, the reason why Romanis are hated in Europe. First of all, who are the Romani people? They are also called gypsies. They are nomadic people who live on the outskirts of towns and cities, and they are horribly oppressed. They first entered Europe about 1,000 years ago, and they have never been allowed to settle anywhere. They're always pushed from one place to another. They have been horribly oppressed in the past. They have been enslaved. They have been killed in large numbers, killed for being Romani, or enslaved for generations, and so on. And even today, they are second-class citizens. Often, even today, they don't have papers, which is citizenship documents of any country. They are horribly oppressed. And they're some of the most talented people in Europe. Some of the best footballers, some of the best musicians in Europe will have Romani origins. Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin, one of the greatest rock singers of all time, Romani. Eric Cantona, one of the greatest Manchester United strikers, Romani. So many, Andrea Pirlo, one of the great Italians, Romani. I can give you so many examples of great Romani people. But they are horribly oppressed. Flamenco music and dance in Spain. Spain is known for flamenco music and flamenco dance, right? That's Romani. It's not Spanish. It's Romani. But why do they not get the sympathy they deserve? Because they are brown. Because they used to be polytheists, Hindus. Who are the Romanis? They are descendants of Indians. How did they end up in Europe? How did they end up in Europe? Well, Indians were enslaved by the millions during the Ghori and Ghaznavi eras. The Ghoris and the Ghaznavis and other Turks, they launched raid after raid into India, took away a lot of plunder, tremendous amount of gold and jewels and wealth, destroyed our temples like Somnath, and killed all the men and took a lot of women and children as slaves and took them into Central Asia to be sold in the bazaars of Bukhara and Samarkand and Tashkent. Indians. And eventually they ended up with a surplus of enslaved Indian women and children. So what they did not want to commit a slaughter perhaps on their soil. They were okay doing it in India, but to kill hundreds of thousands of people perhaps in Central Asia, they didn't want to do that. So they told them to get lost. Leave, but you can't go back to India. Go westwards. And that's how these people ended up wandering all across Europe. So they're the descendants of our people. The language, the Romani language, it is closest to Gujarati, Rajasthani, Punjabi. These languages, northern Western Indian languages. If you speak one of these Indian languages, you will actually understand the Romani language to some extent. Yeah. And they used to be Hindus, but now they practice whatever religion they have had to adopt in order to survive. So many of them are still visibly Indian, brown, like us. And that's why they are hated and oppressed in Europe, even today. Even today, European nations treat them like third-class citizens, even today. In some nations, it's better. Turkey treats the Romani people better than the other European nations. In Turkey, the Romanis don't claim to be Romani. They say we are Turks, we are Muslims, and we are proud Turks. As long as you do that in Turkey, you'll be fine. In Spain, some Romanis are very rich because of flamenco music. In other countries, some footballers and musicians are very rich and all. But overall, they are horribly oppressed. Charlie Chaplin was a Romani. And so on. So what can we Indians do to help them? First of all, let's help ourselves. Okay. Um, we can support them on social media, etc. You can reach out to Romani people and express your support towards them, and whatever. But if you really want to help them, we have to become a much more powerful, much richer, much more powerful, much more capable nation. Then we can help our people. Nilay says, is Britain America's 51st state? Well, Canada is 51st. Maybe Britain is the 51st state. Maybe Canada is 52nd. The Five Eyes nations. At the center, we have the US. Then you have four other nations: the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. These are essentially extensions of the US, additional states of the US, so to say. And yeah, Britain is their number one vassal. So yeah, you could say it's the 51st state if you want to say it. Why not? Now, this is not a geopolitical question. So why do you ask this, sir? Many civilizations and religions ended when, and so on. What do you think this civilization will last for how many years? Which one? Which one, sir? India. India will last another 10,000 years. Lindy effect. MK says, why didn't the US give its nukes to Taiwan to keep China off balance like it gave nukes to Pakistan to keep India off balance? For the longest time, the US saw China as not as a rival, but as one of their tools, possibly an American tool. So the Americans aided and abetted the rise of China. They midwifed the rise of China from the 1970s onwards, ever since the Nixon Mao meeting, and slowly China started becoming a manufacturing nation, and manufacturing stuff that the West wanted, the US wanted at very cheap rates. And the Americans thought that if China becomes more prosperous, it will become democratic. That was kind of crushed. Those aspirations were crushed in 1989, the Tiananmen Square massacre. But the Americans still thought that they can keep China on their side. That was delusional thinking. It's only around 2008, 2012, that period of time, that they started understanding that China is actually a rival. But by that time, China had become quite powerful, and putting, giving nukes to Taiwan would have been a very, very, very big provocation, which could have possibly risked immediate action by China. And maybe that's why they did not do it. So there must be some calculations behind this. Otherwise, they would have loved, I'm sure. If they had seen this earlier, they would have probably put, nukes in Taiwan. Purushottam says, do nuclear submarines run on nuclear fusion? No, they run on nuclear fission. They have miniaturized nuclear reactors, which are fission reactors, not fusion reactors. Geopolitical Dubey says, do you see any power struggle in the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army? Well, there are indications something could be happening. For example, recently I saw some news that Xi Jinping had purged the Chinese military leadership of about 100 generals. A big churn in the leadership. Purging generals means you sack them and perhaps put them under trial or jail them. So maybe this was an initiative whose intention was to ensure that there is no disloyalty in the Chinese Communist Party, in the People's Liberation Army, because the People's Liberation Army is obviously the real. That's where the real power of the Chinese Communist Party comes from. So that's why the PLA has to be 100% loyal to Xi Jinping. So in case there are some people, some commanders, some generals who have shown subtle hints or signs of disloyalty towards Xi Jinping, that will be watched over time. And once a pattern is established, they will be marked for the next in line to be purged. And at a certain time, you suddenly purge 100 of them, which sends a message to everybody that you've got to be 100% loyal. So that seems to have happened recently. I saw the report, I think last week or something, that about 100 high-ranking generals were purged in the People's Liberation Army. So there is something that keeps on happening like this, That's something that was very characteristic of the Stalinist era in the USSR. That was a terrifying era. I mean, such incredibly capable generals were purged during the Stalinist era. Being purged means you were shot, your whole family was shot. That's how it was. So something like this seems to be happening in China also periodically. In the CCP also, you will have that from time to time. So you do see this. It's an ongoing process in the CCP and the PLA. You have to be paranoid if you're a dictator. You have to be paranoid. Otherwise, you never know when you fall out of power. I mean, Lavrenti Beria, what happened to him? One day he is the number one guy. Next day he's being shot in the USSR by Nikita Khrushchev. That sort of thing. You have got to be careful if you're a dictator in an authoritarian nation like that. Shashwat says, your thoughts on oil exploration in the Andamans and the extent and duration to which it could change our fortunes. Well, we'll have to wait and watch. The minister, what's his name? Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, he reasonably recently made a statement that India may be on the verge of a very major oil discovery in the Andamans. So we'll have to see about that. Recently, Guyana, I think it was Guyana that made a huge oil discovery and which changed their fortunes. So if we stumble upon something like that, then it could change our fortune. So I don't know. I think it's too early to count. It's too early to count what the chickens. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, they say, right? So I think it's too early to start celebrating or any such thing. It looks like there are indications in the Andamans where there's a lot of drilling going on. So what happens when you're prospecting for oil under the ocean is you drill, and it's a very expensive process. Each drilling platform costs about $100 million, and you've got to drill 100 times perhaps to find a big reserve of oil. So you end up spending maybe $10 billion. But then what you discover will way more than make up for those $10 billion. So you've got to drill hundreds of such test holes, such shafts under the ocean. And maybe there are indications, it looks like, that it's an oil-rich region, the Andaman region. So let's keep our fingers crossed and let's pray to the gods. And if we do discover something massive, then it will totally change India's fortunes. If we discover something similar to what Guyana has discovered, we become a major oil exporter in a few years. We not only are able to ensure that we have our own supplies of oils, we don't have to import anything else, but we could end up becoming a net exporter, just like Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, or whatever, Iran. Yeah, I mean, imagine how that changes the geopolitical equations in the world. So that could happen. That's the scenario. But nothing has been discovered yet. No announcement has been made yet. So let's wait and watch. But if it happens, fantastic. Purushottam Pradhan says we should develop fusion bombs. In 1998, when we tested 5 nuclear weapons, one of those weapons was a 3-stage device actually. The first stage is a chemical explosion. Chemical explosives like TNT or whatever. Okay, doesn't matter what it is. Chemical explosion. That's the first stage. The second stage was fission. So the chemical explosion rams the two halves of the fission device together, and that gives rise to a fission explosion, fission chain reaction. That's a standard fission bomb. But there's a third stage. The fission implosion will implode a core, which will then undergo fusion. And that fusion reaction gives off way more energy as an output than the fission reaction ever can. So that's a 2-stage or 3-stage thermonuclear fission fusion device, also called a hydrogen bomb. We tested that in 1998. So we have that in our arsenal. A fission fusion device, a thermonuclear device, a hydrogen bomb. Like that's what they used to call that device in the 20th century when I was a little kid. Hydrogen bomb. So we have that. We have fusion devices. Benjamin Netanyahu says, can I become India's most reliable long-term strategic partner in the Middle East, surpassing Iran or even Saudi Arabia? Lessons should India learn from me? Israel is to a large extent a very reliable partner for India in military technology, in military cooperation. There's a lot of convergence of interests that we have with Israel. For example, we have developed certain weapons systems together. The Barak missile, very, very good missile. Okay, it's probably the only missile that can take out a BrahMos. So we have that. Our ships our warships. Okay, they will have BrahMos missiles as well as Barak missiles. So we have the poison and the antidote on the same ship together. So the Barak missile, it can be used for a variety of things, and that's an Indo-Israeli project. Then we have the Harop loitering drone, kamikaze drone. It's not a loitering drone; it's a kamikaze drone, right? Suicide drone. That is being built, manufactured in India, and that's an Israeli design. So we have a lot going on together, and we have other kinds of cooperation as well. Technological cooperation, strategic cooperation, possibly, and much more. So we have excellent relations with Israel. We also have excellent relations with other partners in West Asia, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. Iran is a reasonably good partner for us, no question about that. And other nations like Oman, for example, and so on. So yeah, that is the situation, and I'm sure that India and Israel, the relationship can become even better in the future. We would not ever be opposed to that. Yeah, we would welcome that. Grok says Russia and China are which type of communists? Well, Russia is no longer a communist nation. Russia is not a communist nation. The USSR was a communist nation. What type? Marxist Leninist, I would say. China is still a de facto communist nation. Maoist communism, no longer Marxist Leninist, but the Mao style of communism used to be in vogue. Now it is Xi Jinping thought that drives the ideological part of how China is governed. So that's the flavor of communism that you have in China today. But China is also a capitalist nation. It's an out and out capitalist nation with some socialistic characteristics, and they like to harp upon the socialist part, but it's not really a very socialistic country overall. It's an authoritarian regime. It's a dictatorship for sure, but it's still a very capitalistic with a lot of state control. It's a hybrid. It's a mishmash of things, but it works well for them. Okay. Sergeant Skyland says, what will happen to the Kaveri engine program? I think it's going to be used for UAVs. UAVs is unmanned aerial vehicles, maybe UCAVs, unmanned combat aerial vehicles, maybe something else, and maybe it'll be continued in that manner. So I think it'll continue, but it's no longer going to be considered for fighter jets, fighter planes. Maybe something else is afoot. We'll have to see about that. We'll see. Benjamin Netanyahu says, why do I keep posting wrong maps of India? Explain. Well, I'll have to ask you, sir, about that. Why do you do that? Yeah, I can't read your mind, sir. Can I? Look, Israel and India, we have a lot of strategic convergence, a lot of convergence of interest, but we have differences as well. And yeah, that's why this happens. For example, on many occasions, we vote against Israel when it comes to UN resolutions. On some occasions, at least, and we have some differences here and there, which is why these things happen. Aviral says Turkey is now supplying Bangladesh. Can we not preempt this like Israel before it escalates and becomes a three-front situation for us? You can't just unilaterally start bombing countries and all that. Okay, Israel can do it and get away with it. We can't. And Bangladesh will never become a three-front situation for us. We obviously have to keep an eye on what's happening in Bangladesh, but Bangladesh is simply incapable of challenging India militarily, no matter what they think or what they say. So we have to keep an eye on what's happening. And in case there is something in the future, we can neutralize the threat. Okay, that won't be difficult for us. Achintya Anand says, what's the optimal plan for the Indian Navy currently? Area denial or power projection in the Indian Ocean, which means carriers versus nuclear submarines. The optimal plan. See, let me put it this way. Let's say you are learning how to play cricket and you want to be a batsman. So what's the first thing you learn as a batsman? You learn how to block the ball, how to play defense, right? Play defense. You first have to ensure you don't get out. The ball doesn't go through the gap and hits your stumps, right? You want to ensure that's taken care of first. So the first thing you do is to tighten your defenses and make it impossible for somebody to get you out. So in my opinion, what should be done about the Indian Navy? First of all, we have to be superb at defense, which means we need to have a very powerful coast guard all across our eastern and western coast, maybe hundreds of ships or boats, patrol vessels. Then we need to have, once that is done, we need to have distributed lethality, which is warships and submarines in judicious numbers. And look, what is the measure? How do you measure the lethality of a naval force, of a navy? Is it number of ships? If I have 300 ships, I've got a powerful navy? No. You don't measure the lethality of a navy by the number of ships. The lethality of a navy is measured by the number of missiles you can deploy on any given day. On average, on any given day, how many missiles can you deploy at sea? That's the lethality of your navy. Okay? So you need to distribute the lethality, which means that don't concentrate everything, all the firepower, in a few ships. Distribute it across lots of ships, far and wide across the ocean. So you need to have a mix of different kinds of warships. You need to have corvettes, you need to have destroyers, you need to have cruisers is still operational, whatever, missile boats and submarines, and different kinds of submarines, attack submarines, missile, nuclear submarines and whatnot. And that, once again, I would not want to do power projection right now. You want to essentially have a very visible presence in the eastern and western Indian Oceans, which is the so-called Arabian Sea and the so-called Bay of Bengal. Should be visible and ever present, the Indian presence in the region. And then once you have developed all of this, that you can on demand deploy your ships to a certain region, maybe the Gulf of the Strait of Malacca or the Strait of Hormuz or the Gulf of the Strait of Bab al-Mandeb or whatever. Once you have that ability, that's where you can think of having more ships or maybe more aircraft carriers or something. So I think that's how you should do it. You should do it step by step. Start with the very basics, with just defense. Once your defense is impregnable, then you start developing more options, more offensive options. Then you can start developing power projection abilities to various straits and all that. Then you can have aircraft carriers. You also have the Andamans, where you can deploy fighter planes and submarines. So that's like an unsinkable aircraft carrier. That's how it should be done. Maybe you should have a 20-30-year plan. And ideally, the Indian Navy should have in excess of 300 warships of different kinds, including submarines. It's very feasible. It will take time, but why not do it? Okay. Karan says, could the North Caucasus become a geopolitical fault line, given its native peoples like the Vainak and the Circassians are non-Indo-European and non-Indo-Aryan and hold distinct and Islamic and ethnic identities unlike their neighbors? Look, it's kind of like the Balkans. The Caucasus region is complicated. Let me put the map on. Okay, lots of different ethnicities, small ethnic groups. It's a situation very similar to the Balkan region. So the Caucasus region is the region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Okay, and you have these nations here: Azerbaijan, you have Armenia, you have Artsakh, you have Georgia, you have Russia. In Russia, also in the Caucasus, you have the Chechen people, the Dagestani people, and also you have all these different smaller ethnic groups like the Circassians, the Vainak, the Laz people, and so much more. The Laz people, yeah, you may have the Laz people also perhaps over here. So, and there are lots of old feuds and enmities and all that over here. I'm not sure if the Circassians are non-Indo-European. The Chechens, for sure, are Indo-Iranian. For sure, the Chechens. The Dagestanis, I'm not sure. So I'm not very clear about exactly which ethnicity belongs to which larger group. As far as I see, the Circassians are Indo-Europeans. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is that it's a mishmash of ethnicities. It's got a very convoluted history. Lots of old feuds and enmities are there. But as long as there's a big power in the region or big powers, all those little feuds and all don't matter. So if there is, if see, right now the major power in the region is obviously Russia. You also have Turkey. You also have Iran. So it's at the confluence of Russia, Turkey, and Iran, this region. Okay. And historically, it was part of Greater Iran. right? Um, but the major power today is Russia. And as long as Russia's power is there and its power projection ability is there, all these little rivalries and all, they will not really matter. But you are right, it's a very complex region, just like the Balkans. It's slightly less complex than the Balkans, but yeah, you can compare it to the Balkan region. It can become a geopolitical fault line, and obviously you have instability there. You have the Azerbaijan Armenia conflict. You've had issues in Georgia in the past. There's the Turkish influence, there's Iranian influence, there's the Iran Azerbaijan issue, the Azerbaijan Armenia issue, the Russia Georgia issue, and so much more. The Americans also are trying to do stuff there. Turkey is trying to create a pan-Turan corridor. So it is a geopolitical fault line. But as long as Russia is powerful enough, things will be under control. Gameboy says, how are we sovereign if we rely on US tech, operating systems, apps, cloud? We don't have jet engine technology. We have no jet engine technology. A low G20 tax, 11% of GDP. G20 tax, I'm not sure. Anti-India social media, freebies, nation building. Check Operation Sindoor for reality. What's your question? We are not sovereign. We are sovereign. We have issues. We have less issues than many other nations. Trust me. And what about Operation Sindoor for reality? We won Operation Sindoor. Are you one of those people who believes that we lost Operation Sindoor? Are you one of those people who believe that? Well, if that's the case, you need a reality check. But see, you are right that we rely on US tech. Our operating systems are all American systems. All the platforms we use, social media platforms and so on, are American platforms. We don't have our jet engine technology. Social media is very anti-India. You're right about that. Freebies or nation building, true. I can list 20 more issues that we have, but we are still sovereign. Why are we still sovereign? We have no foreign military bases on our soil. That's one, right? We have our own currency. That's number two. We control our borders. We have issues at the borders, no question. Manipur is a big disaster zone right now. Nobody wants to talk about it. We have POK, which is under Pakistani occupation, Aksai Chin, which is under Chinese occupation. China claims Arunachal. Now we claim Tibet, perhaps say that Tibet is disputed. We have issues. But whatever we control, we control. We have sovereignty over our territory. We have sovereignty over our economy because we have our own currency and we can set our policies. We have sovereignty over our military. We don't have any foreign military bases on our soil, and we don't have our military under foreign command like you have in the NATO nations, and so much more. So because of all those macro factors, we are still a sovereign nation, which most of the other nations can't claim. We have issues, no question. Every nation has issues. But let's not be defeatist and start crying. Let's not do that. We'll solve the issues. Nilay says, Trump is now president, but still CIA is unable to find motive behind the Trump assassination attempt. Why so? Will the public never know the motive? The public will never know the motive. Does the public even today know why JFK was assassinated or who did that? And is Trump chastising the CIA for not discovering the motive? Most likely Trump knows what happened. But the public doesn't need to know about it. That's how it goes. The public is not important. The public doesn't matter. The public doesn't doesn't need to know a lot of things. Even today, you don't know who killed JFK and why he was killed. There's a lot you don't know about. And you're not supposed to know about this. We are not supposed to know about this. We don't matter, right? We are public. Public doesn't matter. Democracy? What democracy? Haha. Godliness says Turkey and China openly help Pakistan in the May conflict. Yeah. Do you believe US or any other nation helped India the same way? No. If not, then does comprehensive strategic global partnerships are just wordplay? We don't have any comprehensive global partnership with anybody. We have no military alliance with anybody whatsoever. So what wordplay? There's no wordplay here. We stand alone. When Iran was hammered by the Americans, who came and stood with Iran? They had this war with Israel, right? They hammered Israel. They smashed lots of neighborhoods in Tel Aviv with their missiles, and Tel Aviv was devastated. Then Tehran was devastated. Iranian cities were devastated by the Israelis. Iranian IRGC military personnel were killed. Their nuclear scientists were killed. Then the Americans hammered Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan with their bunker busting bombs, and so on. All of this happened. Who came and stood with Iran? Tell me. Did Russia come and stand with Iran? Iran is selling, is supplying Russia with Shahed drones, right? For the Ukraine war. Did Russia come and stand with Iran? Mm-mm. Iran is selling very cheap oil to China. Did China come and stand with Iran? Mm-mm. That is the nature of the world, my friends. You think only India is alone? No. Everybody is alone. Everybody is alone. Nobody's going to come and stand with you when things go wrong. So why do we need somebody to stand with us? We are 1.4 billion of us, right? Isn't that enough? So my point is, we don't have any strategic global partnership or any military alliance with anybody. Partnerships and all is this, like you say, like you're right. It's all wordplay. Oh, we are great partners and we share so many values. Blah blah blah. It's all words. Nobody's going to come and stand with us. The Americans have supplied Pakistan with nuclear weapons. You think they'll come and stand with us? They operate the Noor Khan Air Base. The Pakistani nuclear weapons are under the control of an American general. You think the Americans will still come and stand with us? What? They won't. Obviously, they won't. Aviral says, Deputy Chief of Army Staff says, we are fighting three enemies, Pakistan, Turkey, China, Axis, but initially he said four, then corrected himself to three enemies. If he meant four, then who? Well, you have to understand, Pakistan is not one entity, it is two entities. There are East Pakistan and West Pakistan. I hope that answers your question. Right? Does it? If that's what he meant. So I would say that if he said that, then probably that's what he meant, perhaps. Okay. Grok says US will not want Russia to grow economically and would always want it to be in conflict, ? China too wants that, and Russia has golden chance to get ceasefire on his term. Why war still? What ceasefire? What golden chance? Where? Do you think you can trust America's word? If America gives you an assurance, do you think you can trust it? The Americans promised the Russians that you allow the reunification of East and West Germany in 1991, and we will not expand NATO 1 inch eastwards. They promised that. What happened uske baad? Kya hua? What happened? You think you can trust their word? Even if they sign an agreement, you think you can trust them? Even if it's in writing with their stamp and seal and signature of Donald Trump, you think you can trust them? What happened with the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal? It was signed, right, by the US president. Trump walked away from it. All these promises and treaties mean nothing. You have to look at your national interest. You have to look at your threat perception, the threat environment, and you have to make your decisions based on that. The Americans, if they say that, okay, we will give you a ceasefire in the Ukraine war, we'll end the Ukraine war, it means that they want it to temporarily be paused, and as long as they can take care of something else, and then they will restart it anytime they like it. When you are in a maybe more disadvantageous position. There's no golden chance. Golden chance? What golden chance? Please, sir, wake up. There's no golden chance. Rational Reporter says Armenia is so interesting. Small nation, low population, Abrahamic, surrounded by enemies, fighting for survival. Reminds me of another nation. Can we groom it as our own mini attack dog in Central Asia like US did in Middle East? No. It's a nation that's in threat of being destroyed. And who do we attack with it? We don't want to. What do we gain by, let's say hypothetically we use Armenia as an attack dog. How does it serve India's national interest? To understand, to answer the question that I just asked, how does it serve India's national interest? Ask yourself, what is India's national interest? What is it? Is it to start fights everywhere in the world? That's not our national interest. Our national interest is to grow our economy to 10, 15, 20 trillion dollars and move forward, keep moving forward. That's our national interest. Our national interest is not to poke our noses in other people's affairs. Then it will encourage others to poke their noses into our affairs more. Why should we groom Armenia as our attack dog? It will destroy Armenia, first of all. It's a good nation, good people. And secondly, how does it serve our national interest? What do we get out of it? I don't understand. It doesn't serve our national interest at all. It's not a good good idea by any means. So my point is this. See, I criticized what you said, right? But this is what you should take away from my answer. You should know what the national interest is. Always, when you're thinking of what should India do, should we do this? Should we do that? Should we take this course of action, that course of action, whatever course of action you're thinking about? Ask yourself, how does it serve my national interest? And to answer the question, you have to know what the national interest is. The national interest is the long-term security, prosperity of the nation and its people. And the nation and the people should thrive in the long term. That's the national interest. And what is imperative for that? Economic growth. What is imperative for that? Long-term peace. Right? And sometimes to make peace, you have to fight wars. So you can have long-term peace only if you get rid of Pakistan as an entity next to us. So that's why Operation Sindoor makes sense. But having Armenia turn into attack dog, how does it serve our national interest? Okay, that's how you think. That's called critical thinking. Okay, Saurabh Pandey says, loving your Understanding America series. Thank you, sir. When will you drop the next episode? Excited for it. Well, it's already recorded. It needs to be edited. It'll take some time. Right now, I'm doing a whole lot of stuff. I need to cut down on some things. So, yeah, it'll come out soon in the next maybe 2-3 weeks. The next episode, and then it'll hopefully become more regular. There's been a little bit of hiatus, but it will soon be taken care of. All right. Science Nerd said, how come you suddenly added Israel in the sovereign nations list? Earlier, you did not include Israel. You see, you have to reassess constantly. And if you have made mistakes in the past, you have to correct them. You cannot be stuck with your ego and say, I said only 4, so only 4. No, I missed out on Israel. And I have corrected myself. I had made a mistake. Israel should have been included, because when you think of things properly and look at each nation thoroughly, then you will realize that Israel is indeed a sovereign nation, despite whatever. So I corrected myself, and I have now added Israel to the sovereign nation list. You have to be willing to change your opinion. Otherwise, you never progress in life. You will never learn. All right? Okay, Jai Tiwari says, India global power, how shackled by colonial laws, bureaucracy, corruption, poor business ease, broken education system, weak R&D, trash civic sense, decay, sick institutions, health neglect, rising divisions, 19th century judiciary. Sir, I am not saying India will be a global power anytime soon. India should just be a strong power in the region. India should be able to ward off China. And all these, you are absolutely 100% right. All these issues you have listed, they are indeed things that are keeping India down. So many problems. What you are essentially showing us is that India has never decolonized, and we are continuing with the colonial system and the colonial baggage and the colonial garbage, and the rotten colonial system, and all those compromised institutions and so much more. And that's creating more divisions and more fissures and fragmentation and etc. All of that in India. No question about it. And despite that, we are rising as an economy somehow. So imagine if we solve all these problems, what will happen? India will be unstoppable. But the question is, who's going to solve this and how long will it take? I think it will take a long time. To solve these problems in one go, you will need a superhuman leader. We've had such leaders in the past, once in a few hundred years. It's been a few hundred years since we had somebody like that. The last great leader I can think of is probably Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and some of the Peshwas. Before that, you had the father-son duo of Rajaraj and Rajendra Chola. So you need somebody of that stature, of that willpower and fortitude to rise in India. If a person like that rises, then everything will be solved. It will be difficult, but it will happen. So maybe it will take 50 years for this to be solved. By the time, if we can just make decent progress, 6%, 7% economic growth per year, even that will make us a powerful nation. So we have problems, no question. Lots of problems, but let's not be all defeatist. Let's be optimistic. No matter how bad things are, things could be worse and things can get better. So let's be optimistic. We have problems, but we have to look for solutions and not just sit down and lie down and go to sleep. That's not the solution. Grok says today's geopolitical situation, if S. Patel had been first PM, I don't know. You can, 1,000 things could have happened. I don't know. That's all hypothetical. What's the point of thinking about that? Let's be realistic and look at where we are today, right? And where we could go. Purushottam Pradhan says, why don't we become a vassal of the US and we'll be safe? Look at Japan. Japan is very safe. TFR is dead. The economy is dead. And Japan will cease to exist as a nation in the next 50 years. There will be no Japanese left. Very safe. Look at South Korea. Same situation. Very safe. Look at Germany. Where are the German people today? They are being overrun by immigrants. This Germany even exists as a nation. Very safe. What are you talking about? You're looking at things from a very narrow, self-centered perspective. Oh yeah, I will have better quality of life. I will have US cereal to eat in the morning. I will get imports from the US. My phone will be 10% cheaper. That's how you're looking at things. But you're not looking at the long-term effect on the nation. It will destroy the nation. It will destroy our civilization. If you become a US vassal, in 15, 20 years, 80% of Indians will be Christians. Nothing against any specific religion, but this industrial scale demographic re-engineering will happen, which is already happening to a large extent in the country. It will just accelerate. Do we want that? What will be safe? Are you kidding me? Will be destroyed. Raghul says, what geopolitical shifts would happen if Iran became Zoroastrian again? And how could that happen when half of the population descends from Caucasian immigrants who followed indigenous Caucasian, not Indo-Iranian religions? Well, that's a lot of hypotheticals here. I mean, Iran is not under any danger of becoming Zoroastrian again. I hear that a lot of people in Iran no longer follow Islam. That's what I hear. It may be true, it may be false. I don't know. But are they reverting to Zoroastrianism? I don't think they are. Maybe they don't know how to, perhaps. Whatever it is. See, but if Iran becomes Zoroastrian again, first of all, you're right. Half the population is non-Persian, right? Of course, you had Zoroastrianism, which was spread beyond present-day Iran. The Caucasus region, I think it was Zoroastrian before Armenia became Christian. So, let's say hypothetically, the whole of Persia becomes Zoroastrian. Then it will be very different, obviously. What geopolitical shift would happen? I think Iran would become more neutral, or maybe not. Maybe not. When Iran was Zoroastrian, it was at the pinnacle of its power, imperial power. The Hakshamanish dynasty, the Achaemenid dynasty, right? The Rayavaus, Kshayarsha, Artakshatra, these great kings, great emperors who fought the Europeans. If if Persia becomes Zoroastrian again, they'll again go expand westwards, which will not be very good for our friends in Israel, right? Of course, it was the Zoroastrians who saved the Jews from, who gave the Jews shelter in Persia during the occupation by the Assyrians and so on. That's a whole history. But yeah, Zoroastrian Persia was an imperial power. It will become friendly with India, and it will again start its imperial campaigns against the West. So that could happen. Who knows? Who knows? Vamshi Kalem says $125 trillion economy is in our national interest. I completely agree. Next stop is 125 trillion. Totally agree. Next 50 years. Right. Purushottam says, I know that. I just wanted to know from you. What did you know? Why don't we become a vassal of the US? That thing. Yeah, so then I then gave you the answer that you wanted. So, all right, there we go. Okay, let us maybe take a few more questions, and then we will end today's live stream. Let us see. I don't know. Do we have more questions? There's a lot of discussion happening in the chat. Okay, let's take this question as the last question. Please stop asking questions. This will be the last one for today, okay? The question is, in government exam. Okay, in government exam, if question is about the highest peak of India, K2 and Kanchenjunga are both in the option, but K2 is wrong. It's in a disputed area. The government organizations are a part of government. Government doesn't accept them as Indian areas, but want people to be vocal. Why this hypocrisy? Okay, so in the government exam, the question is what's the highest peak of India? They've given options, and in the options you have K2 and Kanchenjunga. And if you select K2, which is in POK, they'll say it's wrong. Is that what you're saying? Well, it should be right. Because see, Everest is in Nepal, half Tibet. Uh, Tibet is a disputed territory, of course. But K2 is in POK, which is Indian territory. So the right answer should be K2. And if in a government exam they're saying K2 is wrong, then those people need to have their heads examined and their loyalties examined, loyalty to the nation, right? So yeah, this happens at lower levels. This happens at lower bureaucratic levels. These bureaucrats, they go through the IAS exam and whatnot, and I don't know what garbage you have to study for the IAS exam. It essentially makes you an anti-national. It makes you hate Indian civilization. So what can I say? It's terrible that such things happen. There are obviously many superb IAS officers, no question, but those are few and far between. Most unfortunately, I don't know what to say about them. So yeah, this is wrong. K2 is the right answer. K2 is the right answer. Okay, there's one more question. This is the last for today. So drones at the border over my home, Operation Sindoor, we won, but India 18, 19 in G20 tax GDP ratio, R&D low, talent we must build inside, like government using Indian OS for example, but no one talks. No, we should have an Indian OS, no question. Let it be based on Linux or whatever, but it should be an Indian OS developed in India and be completely Indian. I completely agree with you. The amount of money we are investing in R&D, the government is investing in R&D is terribly low. It's shameful. Obviously, talent will leave. If you treat talent horribly, talent will leave. So you are right about these things. You're right, no question about it. We have so many problems in this country. They need to be addressed, and that's why sometimes you will see me very frustrated, especially when I talk about the education system, which is the root cause of all of these issues. R&D talent. I mean, the way we treat our talent in the education system, it tells talent, please leave the country. You are not welcome here. And then with the way we treat talent in other sectors, it tells talent, if you want to do well, leave the country. You are not welcome here. In India, we welcome mediocrity. That's the system. And that's what needs to be fixed. So you're right. No question about it. You're absolutely right. All right, friends. Whatever the problems we face, we're going to do well. We're going to surmount them and we're going to win. We will remain positive. We will not be pessimistic. We'll remain optimistic, and we will all work as hard as possible to succeed. All right. So thank you so much for all your questions. I really appreciate them all. It was a fun live stream today. I really enjoyed the questions, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Please keep asking questions. Please keep asking questions of me. Please keep asking questions of yourselves. Keep learning. Keep raising your standards. And yeah, I'll see you next week. If you would like to put a like down there, please do. And I'll see you. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye. See you soon.